Part 1. The final moment. What cultures always believed about death. Death has always been a mystery. The final chapter, yet somehow, also the beginning of something else. We've seen it in every culture, on every continent, across thousands of years, from ancient Egypt to rural Tibet, from medieval Europe to remote African villages. Human beings have always told the same story, just in different languages, that when a person dies, something leaves their body, something unseen, but very much felt. In ancient texts, this moment was sacred. It was described not as an ending, but as a departure, a quiet release, a breath going back to the wind. Some called it the soul, others Atman, Ka, Spiritus, or Chi, but no matter what name they gave it, they all agreed on one thing, that we are not just bodies. We are something more, and that something continues. Have you ever been there when someone passed away? Not in a hospital, not through a screen, but really there, holding their hand, feeling their breath fade? If you have, you know what I'm talking about. That moment, when the room shifts, when the body is still there, but the person is no longer in it. That moment changes you. And long before science tried to measure it, our ancestors honored it. They prepared the body, not just with cloth, but with prayers, with ritual, with understanding, because they believed something sacred was moving on. The ancient Egyptians believed that when someone died, their soul, called the Ba, rose like a bird from the chest, hovering over the body for days. The Ka, their life force, remained near, while priests spoke words to guide them safely to the other side. Death wasn't feared. It was navigated. A journey, not a disappearance. And they weren't the only ones. The Greeks wrote of the psyche escaping the mouth as a butterfly. The Hindus spoke of the Atman, reborn again and again. Native American elders described death as crossing the great river. Christians spoke of the soul ascending. Buddhists of a great unfolding, like a lotus in the dark. These weren't poetic metaphors. These were their truths, and they all told the same story, from different mountaintops, that we are not just flesh, and death is not just silence. So what happens when the soul leaves? Where does it go? What did the ancients believe about the journey beyond the body? And why, even now, in hospitals, in car accidents, in operating rooms, do some people come back from death with stories that sound strangely familiar? Let's step deeper into the mystery. Part 2. The Soul's Journey. Ancient descriptions from East and West. If the soul leaves the body at death, then where does it go? The question has haunted and comforted human beings for as long as we've existed. But across the ancient world, people didn't just ask this question. They wrote answers. Detailed, poetic, often shockingly consistent. They described stages of death, journeys through other realms, and tests that revealed who you truly were. Let's begin in the East. The Hindu belief, rebirth, and the river of karma. In the ancient Hindu scriptures, the Upanishads and the Bhagavad Gita, the soul is called the Atman. It is eternal, unbreakable, unstoppable. When the body dies, the Atman departs, but it doesn't disappear. It is reborn, again and again, through lifetimes, through lessons. Like water poured from one vessel to another, the soul continues until it learns what it was meant to. And when it does, it merges with Brahman, the infinite, the divine, the source of all things. As a man casts off worn-out clothes and puts on new ones, so the soul leaves the worn-out body and enters a new one. Bhagavad Gita. The Buddhist vision. Death as a door. In Tibetan Buddhism, death is a doorway, a passage into the bardo, an in-between state. Neither life nor final death. The soul stays here for 49 days, passing through visions, some terrifying, some blissful. each one a reflection of its own mind. If the soul recognizes these visions as illusions, it can break the cycle of rebirth. If not, it is pulled back into the world again. To Buddhists, death is a mirror, showing you your deepest truths. It's not the end. It's a test of awakening. Ancient Egypt, a journey through judgment. The Egyptians believed death was just the beginning of a long and sacred voyage. In the Book of the Dead, the soul must pass through the underworld, the Duat. There it meets the god Anubis, who weighs the heart against the feather of Maat, the symbol of truth. If your heart is heavy with lies, greed, or cruelty, you are devoured by a beast. If it is light, you move on to the eternal field of reeds, a paradise of peace. I have not caused sorrow. I have not stolen. I have not taken life. Negative confessions of the dead, Egypt. For them, death wasn't scary. It was just honest. Greek thought, the river and the shadow. The Greeks believed the soul, the psyche, left the body at death and journeyed to the underworld. It crossed the river Styx, ferried by Charon, the silent boatman. To pay him, a coin was placed on the lips of the dead. There, in Hades, the soul wandered as a shade, unless it was worthy of the Elysian fields, a land of peace for heroes and the virtuous. Even Plato, the great philosopher, wrote of souls choosing their next lives, like actors choosing new roles. To the Greeks, life and death were part of the same theater. Christian views, the soul ascending. In Christian tradition, the soul departs the body and is judged. Some believe this happens instantly. Others believe in a waiting place, a holding of the soul before resurrection. The early church fathers described the soul's ascent through heavenly spheres, guided by angels, sometimes attacked by forces of darkness. Before reaching the presence of God, St. Paul wrote, "To be absent from the body is to be present with the Lord." In Christian mysticism, the soul's journey is not just about reward, but reunion with the divine, a shared belief across time, whether in Asia, Africa, Europe, or the Americas. One truth echoes through every tradition, that death is not the end, that the soul leaves the body, that what happens next depends on how you lived. They disagreed on the details, but not the destination. And now, in the modern world, as hospitals beep and machines breathe for us, some people are brought back from the edge of death, and they return with stories that sound just like these. Part 3. Stories from the Edge. What people say after dying. Sometimes a person's heart stops, the breathing ceases, the brain shows no activity, and yet they come back. And when they do, they don't come back empty. They return with stories. Stories that are remarkably consistent, no matter their religion, age, or country. These are called near-death experiences, or NDEs, and they might be the most human and most mysterious phenomenon of our time. Meet James, the man who watched himself die. James was a 52-year-old truck driver, no history of spirituality, no belief in the afterlife. One day he collapsed from a heart attack, flatline, no heartbeat for 3 minutes. When revived, James calmly said, "I watched the doctors working on me from above. I wasn't in pain. I was floating peaceful." He described the room perfectly, the color of the nurse's shoelaces, a tool one doctor dropped that no one mentioned until later. He said he left the hospital, drifted through a tunnel, and was met by his grandmother, who had passed decades earlier. She didn't speak, he said, but I knew what she meant. She said, "It's not your time." And then I was back. The light, the tunnel, and the life review. Thousands, even millions of people have reported eerily similar experiences. They speak of a sensation of leaving the body, watching their own resuscitation, traveling through a dark tunnel, emerging into a warm, loving light, feeling total peace, unlike anything on earth, and often a life review, seeing their entire life flash before them. "It was like watching a movie," one woman said, "but I felt everything I had made others feel good and bad." She described it as healing, not judgmental. Across cultures, a global mystery. These experiences aren't limited to one culture. They've been reported by children in India, soldiers in the US, elderly patients in Japan, farmers in Brazil, prisoners, atheists, doctors, and monks alike. Some see religious figures, Jesus, Krishna, Buddha. Others meet deceased loved ones. Some enter vast landscapes, meadows, starscapes, even great libraries of light. And the most striking part? They all say the same thing. It was more real than this life. But is it real? Skeptics argue it's just the brain misfiring, a last gasp of chemicals and fading synapses. But then, how do people know things they couldn't possibly have seen? Why do blind people report seeing for the first time during NDEs? Why do some describe events that occurred after their heart had stopped? Even doctors, once hardened skeptics, have started asking deeper questions. Near-death experiences don't prove anything beyond doubt, but they make us wonder. They echo what the ancients described: light, release, truth, and a return. If this video has moved you or challenged what you thought about life and death, please take a second to subscribe. We're building a channel for thoughtful minds, spiritual hearts, and curious souls, especially those over 60 who know that aging doesn't mean fading, it means awakening. Like, comment, and share this with someone who needs to hear. You are more than a body. You always have been. Part 4. What science found at the brink of death. For centuries, death was a spiritual domain. The soul, the afterlife, the unknown. But in the last few decades, science has begun to peek into that space, not to disprove the mystery, but to understand it. Thanks to modern medicine, more people than ever are surviving clinical death, and that means more brains are coming back from the edge and leaving behind a trail of data. So what exactly is science finding at the moment of death? Let's explore. Brain activity doesn't just stop. Traditionally, we thought brain activity ceased within seconds after the heart stopped. But new studies suggest something astonishing. In 2022, researchers studying dying patients recorded a surge of brainwaves, particularly gamma waves, the kind associated with consciousness, memory recall, and lucid awareness. One neuroscientist described it as a firework of activity, almost like the brain was trying to replay life itself. Could this explain the life review people describe? The tunnel? The light? Or is the brain simply unlocking something we still don't understand? The AWARE study, Science Meets Spirit. One of the most rigorous efforts to study near-death experiences was the AWARE study, Awareness During Resuscitation, led by Dr. Sam Parnia. Hundreds of cardiac arrest survivors were interviewed. Many reported the familiar NDE patterns: floating above their bodies, intense peace, vivid perceptions. One patient accurately described details of their resuscitation, including what happened after they were clinically dead. He described instruments, conversations, and staff movements, verified by medical personnel. Dr. Parnia said, "This suggests that the human mind, the consciousness, may not be completely annihilated at death. It doesn't prove a soul, but it opens the door. The brain, the mind, and the mystery." Here's the real question. Is consciousness a product of the brain? Or does the brain simply receive it like a radio? Think of it like this. When your radio breaks, the music stops. But that doesn't mean the station is gone. Some scientists now suggest that our mind, our awareness, may not be fully contained in the physical brain. If that's true, then death might not be the end of the signal, only the end of the receiver. Science stands between awe and skepticism. Not all scientists agree. Many still believe NDEs are tricks of the mind. a rush of endorphins, a coping mechanism, a final illusion. But the growing body of evidence is too detailed to ignore, too consistent, too human. And the deeper science digs, the more it echoes what ancient wisdom always whispered, that death is not just a biological event, it is also an experience. Part 5. Consciousness beyond the brain. What if your consciousness, your awareness, your thoughts, your you, doesn't end with your brain? That idea used to belong only to mystics and monks. But now, even some scientists are starting to wonder, could consciousness exist outside the body? It's a radical thought, but it might be the missing piece. The brain as a filter, not a creator. Most of us were taught that the brain creates consciousness. Neurons fire, chemicals mix, and somehow, awareness appears. But what if that's not true? What if the brain is more like a filter or a receiver, like a TV set, tuning into a broadcast? Turn off the TV, the show seems to disappear. But the signal? The signal is still out there. This is called the filter theory of consciousness, and it suggests that death doesn't destroy awareness. It simply ends the tuning. Quantum theories and the mind. In quantum physics, strange things happen. Particles appear and vanish. Time bends. Observation changes outcomes. And some researchers, like Sir Roger Penrose and Dr. Stuart Hameroff, have proposed that consciousness might be woven into the fabric of reality itself. That inside our neurons are microtubules, tiny structures that might interact with quantum fields. If they're right, consciousness might not be local to your head. It might be part of something bigger. Out-of-body experiences in the lab. What's even more compelling? Out-of-body experiences, OBEs, have been induced in controlled settings, using virtual reality, electrical brain stimulation, or deep meditation. People have reported leaving their bodies, observing themselves from across the room, and returning forever changed. These aren't just spiritual visions. They're happening in research labs. No one has proven exactly where you go when you leave the body, but it's becoming harder to say that you are only inside the brain. The boldest theory of all? That consciousness isn't just a result of the universe. It is a fundamental part of the universe, like space, time, or gravity. This idea is gaining traction among philosophers and some physicists. It's called panpsychism, the belief that awareness is baked into reality itself. If that's true, then your soul, your inner experience, is not an illusion. It is the most real thing there is. So is this the soul? Science may never use the word soul, but it's circling the same fire our ancestors sat around. Whether they called it Atman, Ka, spirit, or consciousness, they were describing something that survived death, moved beyond the body, remembered who it was. And now, modern science is finally catching up. Part 6. Skepticism, Hope, and what it all might mean. Let's be honest. Not everyone believes in souls. Not everyone believes in an afterlife. And not everyone wants to. And that's okay, because even in the face of near-death experiences, ancient teachings, and scientific theories, the truth is, we're still asking questions that don't have easy answers, but maybe the search itself is the point. What skeptics say, the case for the mind alone. Skeptics, including many neuroscientists and philosophers, argue that near-death experiences are hallucinations caused by oxygen deprivation. Out-of-body experiences are mental projections triggered by trauma. Brain activity surges are electrical storms, not signs of consciousness leaving. And the idea of a soul is just a psychological coping mechanism. To them, consciousness is a function of biology. When the body ends, so does awareness. Clean, logical, measurable, and, for some, comforting. But there's a difference between doubt and dismissal. The skeptics remind us to stay grounded, but not to ignore what we don't yet understand. After all, science once dismissed germs, the movement of planets, the existence of electricity, even love, once thought to be just hysteria. What we can't explain today might be tomorrow's most sacred discovery, and many scientists are now urging humility. Absence of evidence, they say, is not evidence of absence. The deeper question, what do you believe? Let's pause here, not to analyze, but to reflect, because behind all these stories, theories, and experiences is a quiet question waiting for you. What do you believe happens when the body dies? Do you believe we continue? That something of us, call it spirit, soul, energy, moves on? Do you believe the people you loved, who've passed on, might still be with you in some way? Or do you believe this life is all there is, and that's why it's so precious? There's no shame in any answer, but there is something powerful in asking. Hope doesn't need proof. You don't have to see the soul leave the body to live with reverence. You don't need to prove the afterlife to treat this life like it matters. Maybe the soul is real. Maybe it's metaphor. Maybe it's the name we give to the mystery we can't grasp. But what if that mystery is where hope lives? Part 7. You are more than a body. Closing reflection. You've lived a long time. You've seen people go. Maybe you've held a hand as it went cold. Maybe you've sat in silence after the last breath. And maybe you've wondered, where did they go? Were they still there? And when it's my time, will I still be me? These questions aren't just philosophical. They're deeply human. They live in the quiet moments. When the world goes still, when we think about those we've lost. You were never just a body. From the day you were born, you have always been more than blood and bone. You've loved. You've hurt. You've remembered. You've dreamed. You've felt things no machine could measure. And every culture, every ancient voice we've explored today, they all said the same thing, that you, the real you, is not your skin. You are the quiet presence behind your eyes. You are the soul watching the world. For those growing older and wiser, if you're over 60, maybe you think about this more often, not in fear, but in wonder. You've lived through loss. You've seen how fast life passes. And you may sometimes feel forgotten, as if you're fading. But here's the truth the ancients knew. Aging is not fading. It is awakening. It is the moment you begin to remember who you really are. Not a role, not a label, but a soul. You're not too late to wake up. If you've lived most of your life in the physical, and only now you're beginning to sense the spiritual, that's not late. That's right on time. Because the soul doesn't retire. It doesn't grow old. It doesn't break down. It just waits for you to remember it was always there. So what can you do with this truth? You don't need to have a near-death experience. You don't need ancient texts on your nightstand. You only need to remember, to breathe slowly, to live honestly, to treat others as if they carry a soul too, and to honor your life, because it might be part of something eternal. Maybe death is not something to dread, but something to greet, with wonder. If this video touched something deep in you, please share it with someone you care about. Someone who may be grieving. Someone who may be wondering what's next. Someone who needs to hear. You are not just a body. You never were. And you are not alone. Leave a comment below. Tell us your story, your thoughts, your soul. And don't forget to subscribe for more stories that honor the mystery of life and what might come after.